Hey everyone, October is ADHD Awareness Month, and I typically try to do videos during October, but this October has not sort of gone according to plan. I had Hurricane Helene in the beginning, and then toward the end I had some back-to-back conferences I went, and I really haven't had a chance to do anything. But the thoughts of what I could say has actually been pretty strong throughout, and I wanted to finish the month by kind of talking a little bit about something that a lot of ADHD people experience and we don't talk about. So let's talk about judgment. So the literal term of judgment is that it can mean different things depending on the context, but at its core, it's about forming an opinion, decision, or conclusion. And so there's a lot of different ways people, make judgments. We make judgments, morally, personally, legally. But the one I really want to focus on is something called social judgment, because this is something that affects a lot of people with ADHD. Social judgment, and I'm actually just going to read this so you can see the definition. Social judgment refers to the process by which we assess or evaluate others based on social cues, norms, and perceived characteristics. It influences how we perceive people, their intentions, and their behavior. Often it happens quickly with minimal information and is shaped by our experiences, biases, and cultural values. How does this connect to being ADHD? So the first thing, let's talk about first impressions. Many of you guys have heard, if you've ever watched me at a time, I often talk about being the ADHD porcupine. I have a God-given gift to say the wrong thing at the wrong time. I am an extremely blunt, indirect speaker. And so sometimes when people meet me, they sometimes may come off with some not positive characteristics of who I am based on those few conversations at the beginning. So first impressions are when you look at somebody and you make a judgment immediately when you meet them that this person must be this, and you do it based on appearance, body language, tone of voice, how they interact. And sometimes these first judgments are not always right, especially when you look at it through the lens of somebody with some neurodiversity. So let's bring that into the next part of social judgment, which is stereotypes and biases. So we all have certain stereotype thinking of, if you're this, you must be this, if you're this, if you must be this. And so what ends up happening is we interpret somebody's behavior based on what we believe they're going to do. So let me kind of step back. Now, how does this relate to being ADHD? So I'm old now, but I have a lifetime of job reviews where I've had jobs. And all of my job reviews are almost essentially all positive. I do have some, complaints. For example, I'm really terrible sometimes with paperwork. Sometimes I need frequent reminders. But as far as how I work with clients or how I work with other people, I tend to get mostly pretty positive feedback for how I do that. But yet, time and time again, I can tell you about job promotions that were passed over or opportunities that were not given because I wasn't speaking in the manner that people expected them to speak. I even lost a job once because they didn't feel I acted Christian enough because I wasn't doing the church speak. So these are these biases that people make an assumption about what somebody is like based on how they talk. And so for somebody that has a little bit of neurodiversity, that means we don't have access to the same doors and the same opportunities as other people. All of our business things are often by relationship and by connecting. So if somebody looks at you and they say, you're this, or I don't like this, or I don't like something you said, doors can be closed regardless of your education, regardless of your experience, regardless of your knowledge about something. If you don't say it in the right way, then people sometimes get very offended about it and they don't want to be around you. Sometimes there's an issue with bias with social norms and conformity. Like sometimes people that are neurodiverse may act, they march to their own drummer, they listen to their own drum, and sometimes they do things that people sometimes don't understand. Maybe they don't dress up, maybe they're in jeans, maybe they're a little bit off color, maybe they may have funky hair or funky jewelry, and so they don't fit into this. And a lot of times we know that especially when we're talking with children who have neurodiversity, we don't complain about their characteristics as a characteristics of their neurodiversity. We actually attribute it to their personality. So somebody is selfish, somebody is cruel or mean or whatever things that they want to say, arrogant, all these things, because they're not fitting into people's social norms. And social media hasn't helped this, because sometimes it perpetuates a very negative view of what neurodiversity is. And see, the funny thing about being ADHD is everybody is different. Everybody has different symptoms. Although we have a lot of commonalities, sometimes some people are better at controlling their symptoms than other people. And it's wrong to say, you must not have this because you're not doing this, or you can't have this opportunity because of this. And I'm reminded of something that happened to me in high school. I remember I had a friend in high school that had a long illness and passed away in high school. And I had helped the family with the funeral and, the different things that they needed a high school kid to help them with. And I remember walking down the halls of my high school and a school counselor coming up and saying they had spoken to that child's family, and that child's family was just raving on how great I was and all this other stuff and how helpful I was. And I was like, oh, thank you. And she said, I wouldn't have thought that from you. And I looked at her and I said, why? She said, well, I don't know. You just seem more focused with yourself. And I'm like, yeah, that's because that's what you see. And so, yeah, sometimes I can be focused on myself, but that's how I interpret the world. It doesn't make me selfish. I often am willing to give to others more than I sometimes give to myself, but it doesn't fit that social norm of that expectation of what people are supposed to be like. And so this blog, I want you just to kind of sit there and think, how do I treat other people? Am I making a judgment about their qualifications, their skills, just because they irritate me, just because they speak differently and they're very blunt? I remember another incident. I was working at a school and I got very upset with an intern that was training to be principal. And I went to her and I told her I was very upset with her, and I told her why, and I didn't raise my voice and I didn't step into her office, but I had my say about what I was upset about. And then I got my hand slapped the next day because I said what I needed to say. And I said, but I didn't. They said, oh, this person felt threatened. I said, from what? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't go in. I just told them I was really upset with the way they did it. And that really affects the messages that we receive, because I tell people all the time, I don't fit. Even when I try to fit, I don't fit, because sometimes people have an expectation of me that is not valid. They hear stories. I can't tell you how many stories I hear about myself that I sort of get tickled about, and I'm like, wow, I did that. That's pretty interesting. I've had people run down my education. I've had people run down my experience. I've had people run down my practice. I've had people run down me because I did not fit in that social norm that they expect, that social judgment. And honestly, the best thing about getting older is you get to the point you just don't care because you're not going to fit. I have embraced my porcupine. I am totally comfortable with my porcupine. But it's sad that so many people struggle with porcupines, because if they would just realize that there's some beautiful diversity in the world, we could all live with the porcupines.